Maxwell Ashford sat in the Grandview Hotel lobby, his gaze intensely focused on the financial section of the newspaper. This level of concentration was a key factor in his meteoric rise to becoming one of the nation's youngest and most accomplished CEOs. At the age of 36, he was at the helm of Ashford Properties, a luxury real estate empire that his father had established and which he had successfully expanded threefold. The Grandview was one of his latest acquisitions, a historic hotel undergoing a transformation into an exclusive boutique establishment. He was present that day for the final walkthrough meetings, ensuring everything was perfect before the grand reopening. Perfection was Maxwell's standard operating procedure. He demanded precision, control, and had zero tolerance for mistakes or sentimentality. This philosophy extended into his personal life as well. A brief and unsuccessful marriage in his 20s had led him to the conclusion that relationships were a distraction from building his legacy. He dedicated himself to 16-hour workdays, constant travel, and filled his limited free time with activities that could be meticulously planned and controlled: rounds of golf with business associates, charity galas where his attendance bolstered his public image, and dinners strategically designed for networking. He was so engrossed in an article detailing commercial real estate trends that he failed to notice the little girl approaching him until she stood directly in front of him, carefully holding out an envelope with both hands as if it contained something incredibly precious. "Excuse me, sir," the child said, her voice small but filled with determination. "Could you please read this letter? It's very important." Maxwell looked up, startled. The girl appeared to be around 3 or 4 years old, with strawberry blonde hair styled into pigtails secured with bright red ribbons. She wore a red velvet dress that suggested it had been carefully chosen for a special occasion, and her hazel eyes held a level of seriousness that seemed beyond her tender years. "I'm sorry, sweetheart, but I'm quite busy at the moment," Maxwell responded, immediately turning his attention back to his newspaper. "You should probably take that to your parents. Please." The little girl persisted, not budging an inch. "It's for my mommy, but I can't read all the words yet. Miss Ella says it's very important, and someone needs to read it today." Something in her tone made Maxwell pause. He lowered his newspaper and studied her more carefully. There was a sense of urgency etched on her small face that didn't quite align with her polite words, a subtle indication of a burden far too heavy for someone so young. "Where is your mother?" Maxwell asked gently. "She's sleeping upstairs," the girl replied. "She's been sleeping a lot lately. Miss Ella says Mommy is very sick and might have to go to heaven soon, like Daddy did." Maxwell felt a tightness in his chest. This child was discussing death with the casual, matter-of-fact way children often do when they don't fully comprehend the gravity of what they're describing, even as a part of them intuitively senses its enormity. "What's your name?" Maxwell inquired softly, setting his paper aside completely. "Sophia Rose Montgomery," the girl answered formally, as if she had been carefully taught how to introduce herself. "But everyone calls me Sophie. I'm 3¾ years old." "Well, Sophie, why don't you come sit down here and show me this letter?" Sophie climbed into the leather chair next to him, carefully placing the envelope on her lap. "Miss Ella is the lady who brings Mommy her medicine. She gave me this and said I needed to find someone kind to read it because it has instructions for what happens to me when Mommy goes to heaven." Maxwell's throat constricted. He took the envelope, his hands not quite as steady as usual. The return address indicated that it was from Children's Services. With growing apprehension, he opened it and began to read. The letter explained that Sophie's mother, Isabella Montgomery, was suffering from terminal cancer. She had been staying at the hotel because her insurance had run out, and she had lost her apartment. The weekly rate here was more affordable than most other options. Isabella had applied for emergency foster care placement for Sophie, as she had no family to take care of the child. The letter outlined the process and timeline, essentially explaining that once Isabella passed away, Sophie would enter the foster care system. There was a handwritten note at the bottom, presumably from Miss Ella, explaining that Isabella was now too weak to manage the paperwork, and someone needed to help her understand and sign the consent forms. Time was running out. Maxwell sat in stunned silence, his eyes fixed on the words. This little girl, dressed so nicely in her red dress and sitting beside him with such innocent trust, was on the verge of losing her mother and being thrust into foster care with no family to support her. No one to hold on to, no safety net. "Can you read it to me?" Sophie asked. Miss Ella said, "I'm too little to understand, but I want to know." Maxwell looked at this child, who deserved so much more than what life was dealing her. He couldn't bring himself to read her the letter. He couldn't tell a 3-year-old that her mother was dying and that she would be taken away to live with strangers. "It's a letter about making sure you're taken care of," Maxwell said cautiously. "Your mommy loves you very much and wants to make sure you're safe and happy." "Even when she goes to heaven?" Sophie asked. "Especially then," Maxwell replied, his voice thick with an emotion he couldn't completely conceal. "Will you come meet my mommy?" Sophie asked, standing up and taking his hand with the natural trust of a child who hadn't yet learned that the world could be cruel. "Miss Ella said someone needs to help with the papers, and you seem nice. You have kind eyes." Maxwell looked down at the small hand in his and felt something fundamental shift within him. He had spent 15 years constructing walls around his heart, convincing himself that emotional detachment was a sign of strength. But this child's trust, her unwavering innocence in the face of such tragedy, was breaking through every defense he had built. "Yes," he heard himself say. "I'll come meet your mother." Sophie led him to the elevator and pressed the button for the 4th floor. She chattered excitedly as they rode up, telling him all about her mommy's stories, the songs they sang together, and how her mommy always told her she was her brave girl. "But I don't feel very brave," Sophie confided as they walked down the hallway. "I'm scared about heaven. Is it far away?" "I don't know," Maxwell admitted honestly. "But I think people who love us are never truly gone, even when we can't see them." Sophie's room was at the end of the hall. She used a key she wore on a ribbon around her neck to open the door, revealing a modest but clean space. On the bed lay a woman who must have once been incredibly beautiful, but was now gaunt and pale, her blonde hair thin from the effects of treatment. Beside her sat an older woman dressed in nurse's scrubs. "Sophie, sweetheart, you can't just bring strangers to our room," the nurse said gently, then paused when she noticed the letter in Maxwell's hand. "Oh, you found someone to help. I'm Maxwell Ashford," he said. "I own this hotel. Sophie asked me to read this letter." Isabella Montgomery's eyes fluttered open. Even in her weakened state, Maxwell could see the fierce love radiating from them as she looked at her daughter. "Sophie, baby, you shouldn't bother people," she said softly. "He's not bothered, Mommy," Sophie said, carefully climbing onto the bed. "He has kind eyes. He's going to help us." Over the next hour, with Ella's assistance, Maxwell learned their full story. Isabella's husband had died in a workplace accident 3 years earlier, just before Sophie was born. Isabella had been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer 18 months ago and had exhausted every treatment option and every dollar trying to survive for her daughter. She had fought with every ounce of strength she possessed, but her body was finally giving up. "I have maybe a week, maybe 2, Isabella said, her voice weak but unwavering. "I've made my peace with dying. What I can't accept is Sophie entering the system with no one to advocate for her. No one to ensure she's placed somewhere safe and loving." "I don't have any family," Isabella continued. "My parents are gone. I was an only child, and my husband's family cut us off when I got sick. They said I was a financial burden. Sophie has no one." Maxwell looked at the little girl, who had fallen asleep nestled against her mother's side, one small hand clutching Isabella's thin one. He thought about his empty penthouse, his meticulously controlled life, and all his success, which suddenly felt hollow in the face of such genuine suffering. What if she didn't have to enter the system? Maxwell heard himself ask. Both women looked at him, surprised. "What do you mean?" Ella asked. "What if someone wanted to adopt her?" Maxwell continued, his mind racing. "Someone who could give her a good home, financial security, and ensure she's cared for?" Isabella's eyes welled up with tears. "Are you saying you would do that for a child you just met?" "I'm saying I want to help," Maxwell said. "I have resources, connections. I can ensure Sophie is safe." Over the next 3 days, Maxwell did something he had never done before. He put his entire business on hold. He hired the best family lawyer in the state. He worked with social services to expedite an emergency adoption process. He spent every spare moment at the hotel, getting to know Sophie, earning her trust, and talking with Isabella about her wishes for her daughter. "Why are you doing this?" Isabella asked during one of his visits. She was fading rapidly but needed to understand before she let go. "Because 15 years ago, I decided my career was the only thing that mattered," Maxwell admitted. "I built an empire, but I built it alone. I told myself I didn't need family, love, or connection. And then Sophie handed me a letter and looked at me with complete trust. And I realized I've been living half a life. She's giving me the chance to be more than just successful. She's giving me the chance to matter to someone. She'll need so much," Isabella whispered. "Patience and love and someone to hold her when she cries for me." "I know," Maxwell said. "And I promise you I will be there for all of it. I'll tell her about you every day. I'll make sure she knows how much you loved her, how hard you fought to stay with her." "You'll be a good father," Isabella said, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for giving me this peace." 5 days after Sophie handed Maxwell that letter, Isabella Montgomery passed away peacefully, knowing her daughter would be safe. Maxwell sat with Sophie in a quiet corner of the hotel, as Ella gently told the little girl that her mommy had gone to heaven. "Is she with Daddy now?" Sophie asked, her small voice breaking. "Yes, sweetheart," Ella said. Sophie turned to Maxwell, her eyes brimming with tears. "Will you still help me? Or was that just for when Mommy was here?" Maxwell pulled her into his arms, embracing this tiny person who had shattered his walls and shown him what truly mattered. "Sophie, I made a promise to your mother. I'm going to be your daddy now, if that's okay with you. You're going to come live with me, and I'm going to take care of you forever." "Forever and ever?" Sophie asked. "Forever and ever," Maxwell promised. The adoption was finalized 3 months later. Maxwell transformed his sterile penthouse into a warm and inviting home, filling it with toys, books, and all the things a little girl could need. He dramatically reduced his work hours, hired a wonderful nanny to assist when he needed to work, and learned to braid hair, host tea parties, and read the same bedtime story 17 times because Sophie found comfort in the repetition. And slowly, Sophie healed. She still had difficult days when she cried for her mommy, but she also experienced good days filled with laughter, play, and the security of knowing she was loved and safe. 2 years after that life-altering day in the lobby, Maxwell stood at Sophie's kindergarten graduation, beaming with pride as he watched her receive a certificate for kindness. On her About Me poster, she had written, "My mommy Isabella is in heaven with my daddy. My daddy Maxwell takes care of me now. He has kind eyes." Maxwell's business partner found him wiping tears from his eyes. "You've changed, Maxwell. 2 years ago, you would have scheduled this graduation around a board meeting. Now you're crying at kindergarten." "2 years ago, I was successful but empty," Maxwell replied. "A little girl in a red dress handed me a letter and gave me the chance to be more than just a CEO. She gave me the chance to be someone's whole world." That, Maxwell realized, was success that truly mattered. He had learned that the most important letters weren't written on formal business letterheads or filled with merger proposals. Sometimes, the most significant letter is handed to you by a child who trusts you with her entire future, who breaks down your carefully constructed walls with innocence and need, and who shows you that real strength isn't found in emotional detachment, but in opening your heart, even when it terrifies you. Sophie had asked if he could read her letter because it was very important. She had been absolutely right. It was the most important letter Maxwell had ever read because it didn't just tell him about a child who needed help. It showed him the person he had been meant to become all along. If this story resonated with you and reminded you that our most profound purpose often arises from unexpected moments of connection, and that family is built through choice and love, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories about opening our hearts, honoring final wishes, and discovering that true success is measured in the lives we touch. Share in the comments about a time when someone's trust altered your life, or about learning that strength can be found in vulnerability. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is read the letter a child hands us and have the courage to heed its call.